Okay, so we're now started recording. So I'll now hand over to Jeff Moller. You can introduce yourself, Jeff. I am going to present from my screen. So you just tell me what to do.
Okay.
Are you seeing a presentation or just half a screen?
I'm seeing the presentation and the second slide, which is fine. There's nothing secret here. So looks like we're ready to go.
Okay.
How about the others?
Yep, I can see it.
Everybody else seeing?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Hold on,
Thank you, Andrew.
Go on, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, just certainly appreciate speaking with my peers this evening. I'm Jeff Moller. I've been privileged to be a member of CILTNA, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. And, tonight we're going to talk about public-private partnerships as they pertain to the railroad industry. Most of this stuff will be freight-centric, but, there's certainly some passenger elements to it. So next slide, please. Okay, here's some examples of well, I guess you can see my speaker notes. Who cares? Whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do this. So let me see if I can do this. So it just kind of it's weird because it tries to go into this special presentation mode.
Yeah, well, we need a teenager to help us probably, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to go ahead with it.
There you got it now.
Okay. All right. So yeah, there you go. So here's a couple of them, and we'll just start on the upper left. That's the Alameda Corridor, which is the big ditch in Los Angeles. I'll be talking more about that in a moment, so we'll just move along. But beneath that is the Chicago Create Project. I can't remember what that stands for, but it's basically making everything better. Beneath that is the so-called Reno Trench. That's I'm not going to talk much more about that, so I'll just mention that the Southern Pacific used to go right through downtown Reno and irritate the casino owners because they block the tracks and the highway, and also that's about $280 million. It's a little over 2 miles long. It got rid of 10 crossings and all of the delays and congestion and irritation that came along with it. You can see they basically depressed the tracks down into a ditch there, including the train station. So it's it's kind of interesting. There is one track remaining on the left. I haven't been to Reno for so long. I don't know what the purpose of that track is, but it's still there. And then on the upper right is the so-called Heartland Corridor. That's a $150 million project between Norfolk Southern and several states. This involved lowering track in tunnels underneath bridges or something like that to clear double stacks, basically from Norfolk, one of the major ports in the US, to the Midwest. Then on the bottom right is a similar program for CSX. That's an $850 million project. And if you just go to next slide, it'll pop up a picture right there that's right next to my office, which is kind of fun. You can see 2 tracks there and 2 brand new tunnels. There used to be a single tunnel there that did not clear double stacks. So what the company did is they trenched right next to the existing tunnel and built a brand new tunnel, literally about 20 feet from some homes. I mean, it was quite an undertaking. Then when that was done, they put that tunnel into service, and then they tore out the original tunnel and built a second track next to it. So, it's pretty amazing. And I was very impressed by CSX's managing this with the public. The chief engineer of the project lived in a home that the railroad bought, which was the closest one to the tunnel. And, I'm assuming the owner probably was horrified at this tunnel coming and sold out. So he and his family moved up there for a couple of years. And, if anybody had any complaints or concerns or questions, he was right there. And of course, if somebody complained about noise, well, I live here too. I didn't notice that, so it was a pretty clever movement on their part. So let's go to the next slide. And this will talk more about the Alameda Corridor. That thing on the left there is the 3-track trench. You can see those beams at the top to hold the walls up. If you ever fly into LAX airport, maybe about a minute before touchdown, if you're in a window, watch this thing, you can't miss it. In the opposite direction is the port of LA Long Beach, which is, of course, the largest North American port, blah, blah, blah. That's pretty impressive because there used to be 3 separate railroads going to serve the port. And this is just before the huge expansion got underway in the early 80s. You can imagine the misery factor that have been there if all these trains were, on level ground, blocking crossings. I don't know how many trains go through there. It's thousands of containers a day and all that. So, pretty amazing. But that was, I got a little bit of data about that. Let's see, in 2017, there were 413,000 TEUs that were operating through there. The way it's paid for is that each TEU represents a tax which is paid to the operating authority to build and maintain it. 200 crossings were eliminated by this project, just to give you an idea. And, there's about 15,000 hours a day of vehicular traffic delay that was eliminated by this thing. So, this is an example of where there's an awful lot of public benefits and with proper care, the public participated in the development of this thing. I mean, the railroad certainly benefited too, but it was a win-win for both. And my belief is it's been very successful. I mean, obviously traffic was down for a couple of years, but it's so successful they're actually expanding the concept to the east now. They call it Alameda Corridor #2, because all the traffic goes downtown and then turns to the east and goes, to throughout the United States. So anyway, let me just stop for a moment. I'm going fairly quickly here, so if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to speak up. I'll just pause for a moment.
Just one quick question, Jeff. These public-private partnerships, these were all in existence before the U.S. president announced about the billions of dollars in infrastructure funding in the U.S. So this would have something to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, the Alameda Corridor is maybe 15 years old now, for example. Yeah, I guess I should have mentioned too that, railroads in the past were hesitant to participate in these kinds of endeavors because of the fear of strings attached. When the public participates in something, obviously they expect to get something out of it. But we did find a way to make this work, and I'll share the protocols that we use for these, towards the end of our talk about, what are the principles we use and how do we do it and so forth. But these are all separate endeavors. But this one here probably was relatively easy to sell because of its obvious benefits, 200 crossings and so forth. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one here, which is the Chicago Create project. And this is a less interesting slide. Whoops! Oh, you're stealing my thunder there. Oh, go back.
Sorry.
All the fun stuff, you got to hold that back. Yeah, don't let anybody see that. Don't worry about it. This is fine. Just leave the bridge there. Okay, there. Rather than talk through this, there's this is from the website. In fact, it's very easy to find if you want to learn anything in detail about the various projects. But you can see it's a huge amount of money. Stop for a moment and think about the challenges of getting different railroads, the Cook County, which is Chicago, the state, and the federal government all to agree on this stuff, to agree on the projects, to agree on the funding levels and so forth. It's quite an undertaking. I like, the way this came about was that probably about 12 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, Chicago had a pretty bad snowstorm and it paralyzed traffic, which it's wont to do, but it literally took months for the industry to recover. It was so bad. The concept that we came up with was, you've seen a picture of 2 mules that are tied together and they're both pulling in opposite directions, trying to eat 2 bales of hay. And they agree, well, why don't we both eat this one? Then we'll go both eat that one. I mean, before this phenomenon, a railroad would say, well, there's the end of his train. It's your problem. See ya. And the other guy, wait a minute, I'm not ready. And so, not only did we reach agreement on all these projects, and a lot of them have been done already, but we reached agreement to set up a center there where it's manned 24/7, where there's a lot of coordination going on now. If nothing bad is happening, like a storm, there's still things like, well, I'm gonna have to take this track out of service for a week because I'm gonna replace this bridge or something like that. So there's constant communication. And so now even bad snowstorms are weathered within a couple of days. We're back to full speed again. So it's been wonderful. So there's the project. So let's take a look at a couple of them.
Okay.
The next one is that blue bridge you saw for a moment. That bridge there handles passenger trains. You see the new abutment to the right with the overhead wires and so forth. I only show this thing because it's so neat. That's a 400-foot span, and it was assembled there next to the main line, and they put it on these strange vehicles. You can see a couple of them underneath it that move sideways and forwards and backwards. And within a weekend, they rolled it into position, hooked it up, and had it in service. So this is just sort of an example of some of the very dramatic things we do there. That got rid of a couple of very busy industrial highway crossings down there. You can see them down below. And, I think if I remember right, this is mostly just for passenger trains passing over that, but it obviously increased safety because there's no longer the risk of hitting vehicles and so on. So somewhere on the YouTube, there's a really neat video of this happening. You don't see it here, but they had to take down all the crossing signals and the traffic control signals, because they would have been knocked over when they swung this bridge into position. So quite an undertaking, and the camera was rolling continuously. So it shows at night, people crawling all over it, putting it together and so on. So, okay, let's look at another one here.
How long ago was that, Jeff?
That was, I think, about 6-7 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you just, okay, hit it again, because I've got pictures that pop.
There you go. Okay,
there's a map of the various corridors that we're working on in Chicago. Chicago is, if you're not familiar with it from a rail perspective, it really is the center of the United States for rail traffic. The terrible fire there in the 1889 or whatever it was, kind of wiped the city off the map, and so it created a clean slate to rebuild it. And so all of the railroads merged there or joined there. Very few railroads went through Chicago; they all met there. So it's always been a very busy area and still is. And so those are some of the major routes that are getting major projects on them. So flip the slide again.
Yeah.
And here's an example right here. You can see the locomotives in the foreground are standing on the route that has just been closed. And there's a passenger train approaching overhead now. So, there used to be conflicts there, either a passenger train waiting for a freight train or for, a passenger train waiting for another passenger train or whatever. And so this is an example of a so-called flyover, where the public participated, because obviously the passenger trains are now much more on time, and the delays that we used to have are gone. So there's an example. So tap it again. And here's another example here, west of Chicago, where this is a very busy area, and the track there handles, I don't know how many passenger trains a day. It's Metra and Amtrak, but it probably has about 50 freight trains a day. But there is a passenger station there, and so the passenger trains would stop on top of that road there as they loaded and unloaded people. So there was delays there all the time. And so that's gone now, so there's an example. Okay, now flip to the next slide. Now, this is not a CREATE project, but it's so interesting, I wanted to include it. What you see there is, you'll see an overhead view of it next, so I can't remember how many tracks there are, but in the distance there, that bridge is the orange line for the Chicago L that goes from Midway Airport. So if you ever go into Midway Airport and take the L downtown, you'll go right past this area. It doesn't look like this anymore. But what happened here, I don't remember which railroad owned this crossing, but they didn't have a lot of traffic. And so they had very little incentive to spend money to upgrade what was there. So every mighty train, including Amtrak, would come to a stop. A man in that little gray shack there would look out the window, and if there were no trains coming, he would pull a lever and give him a clear signal with that old semaphore signal there. You can see the signals face multiple directions. I mean, this anachronism should have been torn down 30, 40 years ago, but it wasn't. And it's an example of the railroads getting together, including the railroad that didn't own this, saying, look, I'll help pay to get rid of that damn thing. So flip to the next slide there. And you'll see that it wasn't just tearing down that shack, which is right there. You can see the signal is gone. The white truck is standing where it used to be. But we literally dug a hole, replaced all the tracks. Well, first they put huge concrete slabs in the ground. Then they poured the ballast. Then they dropped all these prefabricated rails. And you can see, gray areas where the new joints were installed, just on the edge there of the 4-track main, for example. And all this was done in a weekend. So all the traffic had to shut down for that period, but Friday, everything shut down, and Monday, all the new signals were in place and everything was gung ho. So pretty amazing. And I'll also point out something that you have in Canada, which we don't have here, which is what we call proximity guidelines, because you can see those beautiful new homes that are being built right there. Now, if you've ever been by what we call a crossing diamond like this, they make a hell of a lot of racket, a coal train pounding and banging across that thing. I hope that those homes were discounted, because that's not really a good place to build homes, but somebody thought it was a good idea. So there you go.
Well, at least you're a real rail fan.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, flip to the next slide. It's the last one, and it gives some of these protocols I'd mentioned earlier. And the idea is that the railroad, you sit down and negotiate. We basically say, well, we'll pay for our benefits, and the public, you should pay for yours. And some of the benefits are outlined there, but the way the railroad benefits are calculated is by reduction of train delay. And that can be kind of controversial. There's a big debate about that right now, east of New Orleans, for example. I can get into that later if you wish, but for the moment, there are widely recognized, pretty sophisticated models that can be used to calculate capacity and speed and velocity and so forth. And you can set up the existing, and then you can set up the projected future, and you can see how the trains perform through there. And so using these protocols, we have managed to do all of these heavy projects that you can see with an awful lot of public funding. And as you might imagine, when there's public funding, there's lots of scrutiny and there's lots of challenges, lots of oversight and so forth. So it's been a good experience for us overall, and I assume it's going to continue. So that completes my formal remarks, but happy to add questions or talk about something else maybe.
What interested me, Jeff, was how the freight trains and the passenger trains you were showing where they can going together. Our biggest problem in Canada, of course, is the NCP own all the track. So
Yeah.
Via Rail, the passenger rail, I take Via a lot to Ottawa, Montreal, and stuff like that. Well, if the freight trains are too many that day or something, we have to sit on the siding and wait. So now the Via Rail announced, and of course the federal government's sticking the money in, but they're going to spend, I think, $2 to $4 billion to build from their own lines from where I'm living here in Lindsay, just east of me in Peterborough, a line from Toronto to Peterborough and then to Ottawa that will be just them, which is good to know, because somehow we got to find that way too, because that's why I don't think here, outside of commuter trains in Toronto and all that, but from long distance passenger freight isn't good here because of that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm an apologist for a corrupted. Are we still recording?
Here we are, yes, because I want these questions.
Actually,
yes.
My perspective, of course, is based on the rail, but the thing is that, a lot of people might poke fun at the railroads and say, well, you guys tore up all the track in the 70s. Now you want us to pay to put it back. Well, a response might be, well, we paid taxes on that excess capacity, which we didn't need at that time. And so we yanked it out, and now the capacity is needed again. So let's talk. Let's not dredge up history and try to use that to explain what should be today. But yeah, the thing is that obviously CP is enmeshed in a complex merger here in the United States, and they have expressed a willingness to work with Amtrak, which they do host them already in a few places in their network here, and they're gonna, they've already made an offer to do so west of New Orleans. So I guess my thought is that the CP management obviously is familiar with this through their work in Chicago, as is CN. So the model of public-private partnership might be useful to consider. In other words, the railways are going to benefit from the passenger trains no longer operating on their network. So, that's a benefit for them. And obviously the passenger trains will benefit because they'll have much more predictable and probably faster service.
Yeah. So Jeff, just a fantastic overview. Thank you. That's really, really interesting. I think the other point is, I think there's definitely a role for public-private engagement with these kind of projects, because there are benefits, not just if it's a passenger rail point, but you mentioned about the grade crossings. I mean, the economic impact on people, the amount of time that could save by taking those out, as well as I think the operational flexibility that gives to the railroads when they're no longer kind of got that potential constraint or, you know, conscious of the impact of it.
Yeah, I should have mentioned Tower 55, which is downtown Fort Worth, which is a microcosm of some of these complex intersections where some serious money was spent to do a flyover down there to cut the congestion. So yeah, and of course there's limited but some Amtrak service in that area. So and of course the Trinity Rail Express. So it's all to the good.
No, well, it is. And so at the last Outlook conference, Peter Jota from the Port of Vancouver spoke about the investment they were doing to get grade separation, remove a lot of the grade crossings, which now trains are so much longer going into the port. It was never an issue in the past, but it now is. And, it's another example of kind of, public-private kind of partnership to do those projects. But I think, out of the examples you gave, Create has just been such a huge success, really, because, it's not just one rail company, it's a host of them. And you've got, obviously, Chicago politics, I imagine, is not the easiest thing in the world to kind of deal with. But I think in terms of its, just the economic upside of it, that is the heartbeat. That is the heart, really, of what is the rail network. And if that can't be operating smoothly, then that reverberates across the whole system. And that's our whole economy, isn't it? The whole moving economy.
Yeah, it's complicated because there are trains that run through Chicago, but they still get bogged down too. For example, CSX built a huge terminal in North Baltimore, Ohio, which is near Toledo. And, trains from the West Coast will go directly there, but they still struggle to get through town too. And that, that's all the high value intermodal merchandise and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know, Arthur, if you got any comments for Jeff?
Not specifically. One of the other elements that may have some influence in the public-private partnerships on the rail side is that safety issue. The transit and railway age newsletters, just in the last few weeks have been mentioning the Brightline crash. And I just watched that video this afternoon. I finally went to find it, and some of the comments, of course, it was caused by the automobile driver, but some of the local comments were that the public should not be providing any funding for any of this because Brightline's only reason for building a railroad was for land development and so on. So you have the usual NIMBYs, the not in my backyard, the people that are against everything, no matter what it is. Here in the Dallas area Rapid Transit is building a new line from Plano to the airport using the former Cotton Belt main line. And I went to one of the community meetings with all of the locals being so against actually putting trains on those tracks.
Yeah.
And of course, I went just as a citizen, and a few of the dark people knew who I was, but I really couldn't open my mouth. But the question I would have asked was, how long after you bought your house did they put those railroad tracks in? And obviously the tracks were there decades before that was developed in any kind of land. So, the part of that deal with the public-private partnerships is spending public money for what is perceived to be a private benefit. And then having spent a pretty fair amount of time in government service, and dealing with the Federal Transit Administration, previously UMTA, and in different cities, is the rules that come with it and the potential corruption and fraud and so on. Yeah, and the money going where it really shouldn't. So, I mean, there, you know, from my perspective, there were a lot of moving parts to that. In addition to the pure economic benefits, which is, for me, that's the side that I'm on.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, as well, you know, nobody's saying that PPP is easy. And I imagine for the railroads themselves, they prefer to kind of just own the project, do it themselves. They've got their own, you know, business case for doing it. But in certain cases, mega projects or that kind of complexity, it can work. But I guess you just pick the areas you want to do it to get through that.
Yeah, well, we certainly love to get rid of crossings wherever we can. And so, you know, that's a real attractive component of this for us.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Hey, so well, listen, I guess kind of we're coming up to the end of our regular meeting. So, Jeff, I'd really like to thank you for that. And like I say, I'm gonna publish this as well on our site, because I think it's going to be informative for our other members to look at. So let me stop the recording